and you will see something that should not be possible. Tables empty, showcases bare, dealers standing behind glass cases with nothing in them. Not because the silver doesn't exist. It does. It's sitting in vaults, in safes, in back rooms, available in abundance. So why are the very people whose business is built on selling silver choosing not to sell it? Why would a professional walk away from a paying customer in a market with no shortage at all? There is an answer. And it has nothing to do with silver running out. It has everything to do with what these dealers know, that the public does not. By the end of this analysis, you will understand a signal most people will never notice. A signal that historically has appeared right before the ground shifts beneath an entire market. Stay with us, because what these dealers are quietly doing right now may be the most important warning in the bullion market today. Now, before we go further, I want to ask you for something, just a small favor, really. If you're someone who has lived long enough to remember when a handshake meant something, when people kept their word because their name was attached to it, then you already understand why we do what we do here. We look past the noise, and we tell you the truth plainly, the way it used to be told. So if this channel has earned even a little of your trust today, would you consider subscribing? It costs you nothing. But it helps us keep doing this work honestly for people like you who still value a straight answer over a flashy headline. And tell us, in the comments below, where are you watching this from today? We'd genuinely like to know who's sitting with us on the other side of this screen. Now, let's get into exactly what's happening on these coin show floors, and why it matters far more than most people realize. You said, write 800 words for part 1. The story must be interesting and keep the audience engaged. It started with a number that didn't make sense. At a major regional coin show, an analyst who tracks the bullion market closely began walking the floor table by table, the way he always does. He wasn't looking for a deal, he was looking for information. And what he found stopped him in his tracks. More than half the dealers at that show had no silver bullion on display. Not a single coin, not a single bar, nothing. This is not normal. In fact, it is the opposite of normal. Silver at that exact moment was not scarce. It was not hard to find. Mints were producing it. Refiners were processing it. Wholesalers had plenty sitting in inventory, ready to ship to anyone who wanted it. By every measure that matters, supply was healthy. And yet, dealer after dealer stood behind empty glass cases. When the analyst asked why, the answers were vague. Some dealers shrugged. Some changed the subject. A few admitted quietly that they simply weren't selling silver right now. Not because they couldn't, because they had chosen not to. This is the detail that should make any serious observer stop and pay attention. In business, especially in a business built entirely around buying and selling a physical product, choosing not to sell when the product is available and customers are standing right in front of you is not a small decision. It is a deliberate one, and deliberate decisions are rarely made without a reason. So what was the reason? To understand it, it helps to step back and look at what was happening in the broader market just before this show took place. In the days leading up to it, the price of silver had dropped. Not collapsed, not crashed, but dropped enough that anyone holding inventory would have noticed it on paper. At the same time, a handful of other dealers, a smaller group but a visible one, were doing the exact opposite. They were selling aggressively. Silver eagles at premiums so low they barely covered costs. Generic silver rounds priced at the spot price itself with no markup at all. These dealers weren't holding back. They were moving product fast, and customers were lining up to buy it. So now there were two very different stories happening on the same show floor at the same time with the same product. One group of dealers was selling silver as fast as they could. Another group was refusing to put any out at all. This is the kind of pattern that, on the surface, looks confusing. But to anyone who understands how inventory-based businesses actually think, it tells a very specific story. It is not about silver running short. It is not about a lack of customers. It is about something happening inside the minds of the people running these businesses, a difference in how they were each reacting to the exact same set of market conditions. And that difference matters far beyond coin shows, because the same pattern, some operators reacting with confidence while others freeze, shows up in nearly every industry every single time prices move quickly in one direction. Retailers facing falling costs, wholesalers facing shifting demand, even small business owners watching the value of their own inventory shift overnight. What separates the dealers who kept selling from the dealers who shut their cases isn't luck. It isn't access to better silver. It is something far more fundamental. A difference in how each of them defines the value of what they hold. That difference is the real story here. Not the silver itself, but the decision-making behind it. Most people walking through that coin show that day saw empty tables and assumed it meant something simple. Maybe silver was running low. Maybe demand had outpaced supply. Maybe these dealers just hadn't restocked yet. None of that was true. What they were actually witnessing, without realizing it, was a kind of stress test. a moment where falling prices forced every dealer in that room to reveal, through their actions, exactly how they think about risk, value, and their own business. Some passed that test instantly. They kept selling, kept their cases full, and kept their customers happy. Others failed it, quietly, by doing nothing at all. And understanding exactly why one group acted with confidence while the other group froze is where this story becomes far more important than a single coin show in a single town. That is where the real lesson begins. To understand why some dealers kept selling while others shut their cases, it helps to picture two business owners standing in the exact same storm, holding the exact same umbrella, but reacting in completely different ways. Both of them own silver. Both of them watched the price drop in the days before the show. Both of them are looking at the same spreadsheet, the same numbers, the same market. And yet one of them is calm. The other is panicking. Why? The answer lies in a question that sounds simple, but actually separates successful inventory-based businesses from struggling ones. When you look at what you own, what number do you see? For one type of dealer, the number that matters is what he paid. He bought a box of silver rounds last month or last year at a certain price. That price is locked in his mind as the true value of that silver. If the market price now sits below what he paid, he sees a loss, not a small inconvenience or a loss. And nobody enjoys selling something at a loss, even on paper. So instead of selling, he waits. He holds the inventory, hoping the price climbs back up to where he feels comfortable again. This feels rational. It feels careful. It even feels responsible, like a smart businessman protecting his investment. But it is exactly the kind of thinking that quietly drains a business from the inside. For the second type of dealer, the number that matters is something completely different. He doesn't ask, "What did I pay for this?" He asks, "What would it cost me to replace this today?" That single shift in thinking changes everything about how he runs his business. If the market price drops, he doesn't see a loss sitting in his showcase. He sees an opportunity. Because if he sells his silver now, even at a thinner profit than he originally hoped for, he can simply turn around and buy more silver at the new, lower price. His business keeps moving. His shelves stay full. His customers stay happy. And because he's always thinking about tomorrow's replacement cost rather than yesterday's purchase price, falling prices don't scare him. They barely register as a problem at all. This is the quiet difference between the dealers who emptied their cases and the dealers who kept selling at that coin show. The ones who kept selling, moving silver eagles, silver rounds, anything they had, were almost certainly running their businesses on replacement cost thinking. They understood that a sale today, even at a smaller margin, is more valuable than inventory sitting untouched on a shelf, slowly losing relevance as the market moves on without it. To these dealers, speed and movement matter more than squeezing every last dollar out of a single transaction. The ones who shut their cases, on the other hand, were very likely frozen by acquisition cost thinking. To them, selling at today's price felt like admitting defeat, so instead of adjusting, they simply stopped. They removed themselves from the market entirely, rather than face a number on a screen that made them uncomfortable. This is a far bigger lesson than it first appears, and it stretches well beyond coin shows and silver coins. Any business owner who holds inventory, clothing, electronics, raw materials, even real estate, eventually faces this exact same fork in the road. Prices move, they always do. And in that moment, the business owner has only two real choices: adapt immediately to the new market reality, or freeze and hope the old reality returns. History does not favor the ones who freeze. Markets that fall don't usually reverse on command, simply because a business owner wishes they would. Prices respond to supply, demand, and broader economic forces, not to anyone's personal comfort level. The dealer who waits for his purchase price to return is making a bet on hope, not on strategy. Meanwhile, the dealer who keeps moving inventory at the new market price is doing something far smarter. Even if it looks less impressive in the moment, he's staying relevant, he is staying liquid, he's keeping his business in motion while his competitors stand still. This single mental shift, from what did I pay to what would it cost to replace, is the real dividing line running through that entire coin show floor. And it is the same dividing line that, quietly, decides which businesses survive a downturn, and which ones simply disappear from the market without anyone fully understanding why. The replacement cost story explains a great deal, but it does not explain everything. Because not every dealer who left his case empty was simply frozen by fear of a paper loss. Some of them were doing something far more calculated, and understanding their reasoning reveals a second, quieter layer to this entire pattern. Consider the dealer who runs the only coin shop in his town. In a city with a dozen competing dealers, pricing has to stay sharp. If one dealer charges too much, a customer simply walks to the next table or drives across town to the next shop. Competition forces prices toward fairness almost automatically. But take that same dealer and place him in a small town hours from the nearest competitor, and the entire equation changes. There is no table next door. There is no shop across town. If a local customer wants silver, there's exactly one place to get it, And in that situation, the dealer holds something far more valuable than inventory. He holds leverage. A dealer like this may have looked at the coin show, watched other sellers racing to the bottom with rock-bottom premiums, and made a calculated choice to simply not participate. Why compete on price in a crowded room when back home, with no competition at all, he can charge more and customers will still pay it? For him, holding back inventory at the show wasn't fear. It was strategy. He was protecting his pricing power in the market where it actually matters to him. This is a lesson worth sitting with. Pricing power doesn't come from being the loudest seller in the room. It comes from controlling access that customers cannot easily get elsewhere. The dealer with no local competition doesn't need to win at the coin show. He already wins every single day, simply by being the only option. But not every empty case told a story this deliberate. A second group of dealers appeared to be doing something entirely different. They hadn't come to the show to sell bullion at all. Their tables were filled instead with rare coins, certified collectibles, older currency, pieces aimed at collectors rather than stackers. For these dealers, the coin show wasn't a bullion marketplace. It was a numismatic one. Silver bars and rounds simply weren't part of their plan, so their absence wasn't a signal about the silver market at all. It was simply a difference in business focus. This matters because it's tempting to look at a pattern and assume every dealer is reacting to the same forces for the same reasons. In reality, businesses inside the same industry can be playing entirely different games, chasing entirely different customers, even while standing at neighboring tables. Then there was a third group, and this one is perhaps the most revealing of all. Some dealers, often from an older generation, simply seemed unaware of where the bullion market currently stood. Their prices weren't strategic. They weren't protecting local leverage. They were just outdated. When asked about specific items, several had no flexibility at all, holding firm to prices well above fair market value, seemingly unaware that the broader market had already moved on without them. This kind of mismatch is common in any industry where information doesn't travel evenly to everyone at the same speed. Some operators stay sharp, watching every shift in real time. Others rely on instinct, habit, or outdated assumptions, and slowly drift further from where the market actually sits. Put these three groups together, and a more complete picture starts to form. An empty showcase at a coin show could mean fear of a paper loss. It could mean calculated leverage in a market with no competition. It could mean a deliberate focus on a different type of customer entirely. Or it could simply mean the dealer hadn't caught up to where prices had already moved. 4 very different reasons. One identical outcome, silence on the show floor. And this is exactly why surface-level patterns can be so misleading. To understand what a market is really doing, it isn't enough to count empty tables. Someone has to ask why each one is empty, because the answers rarely come from a single cause. That deeper question, knowing which dealers are acting from strategy and which are acting from confusion, is what separates a careful observer from someone simply guessing at headlines. You said, now move to the final part, or we're forward our 600 words. Every market dislocation creates a window. The question is who walks through it prepared and who simply stumbles into it by accident. At this coin show, that window was real. While a large portion of dealers froze, hesitated, or simply chose not to participate, a smaller group of sellers kept moving silver at prices that, just months earlier, would have seemed unthinkable. Silver eagles changing hands for barely more than spot. Generic rounds selling right at spot price with no premium attached at all. For an informed buyer, this was not luck. It was the direct result of the very behavior described earlier. Dealers thinking in terms of replacement cost, willing to keep their business moving rather than freeze in place. Their willingness to sell created a temporary gap between what silver was actually worth and what a small number of sellers were willing to accept for it. But here's the detail that most casual observers miss. Low price alone does not guarantee a sale. At that same show, a seller offered hand-poured silver pieces at a price several dollars below the spot price itself. By any pure pricing logic, that should have sold out almost instantly. It did not. A meaningful portion of that inventory remained unsold by the end of the event, simply because not every buyer wanted that particular form of silver. Some preferred mass-produced rounds. Some wanted government-minted coins. The product itself mattered just as much as the price attached to it. This is a detail with weight far beyond coin shows. In any market, price is only half of the equation. Demand for the specific form, the specific product, the specific package that price comes wrapped in matters just as much. A business owner who assumes that cutting price alone will always move inventory is missing half the picture. So what separates the buyers who walked away with real value from those who walked away with nothing? Preparation. Before stepping onto that show floor, the buyers who benefited most already knew what fair market value looked like. They had already done the homework, checking current pricing trends, understanding typical premiums, knowing roughly what a reasonable price should be before a single conversation with a dealer ever began. When they encountered a seller pricing aggressively, they recognized it immediately, because they had already built the framework to recognize it. Contrast that with a buyer walking in with no preparation at all. He has no internal benchmark. He cannot tell the difference between a fair price and an inflated one. He is at the mercy of whichever dealer he happens to approach first, trusting a stranger's sticker price simply because he has nothing else to compare it against. This is the real takeaway sitting underneath this entire story, and it reaches far beyond silver, far beyond coin shows, into nearly every corner of business and investing. Opportunities created by market dislocation do not wait patiently for someone to get ready. They appear suddenly, often without warning, and they reward only those who arrive already equipped to recognize them. The entrepreneur who studies his market continuously, who understands true value before a deal is ever on the table, will recognize a genuine opportunity the moment it surfaces. The one who hasn't done that work will either miss it entirely, or worse, mistake a bad deal for a good one, simply because he has no way to tell the difference. The dealers standing behind empty cases at that coin show were not the real story. The real story was always the discipline required to recognize value, prepared long before the opportunity ever appeared on the table.